It is Sunday, all you Minties, and that means it is time for an Omnibus overview. And today we are doing Legion of Superheroes 5 Years Later Omnibus Volume 1, so please stay tuned. And welcome back, everybody. Now, the very first thing I want to do while I spin this around so you can get a closer look at this design. By the way, a big fan of this spine right here. I love how big that logo of Legion of Superheroes is. 5 Years Later Omnibus Volume 1. Hey, Volume 2 would look really good there. Right? Just imagine. Volume 2. To collect the entire saga. From 1989 to 1994 of the 5 years later. So, before I talk about that, and before I give you a brief little history of the Legion of Superheroes, in case you don't know who they are, this video I was trying to do last week. But it has been a long time since I've read any Legion of Superhero comics. As a matter of fact, I think the last time I read any Legion of Superhero comics was the New 52 run. And apparently I wasn't the only one because DC canceled that line. And they've been teased at coming back. I'm going to talk a little bit about who they are, where they came from, and then what this is and what makes this such a big deal. But also really like the design of this. Makes it look so much more epic, even though it is an epic storyline. The big deal about this book, I will go ahead and say, is that none of these stories, none of these comics in here have ever been collected in any kind of collected edition. It's never been in a trade paperback, it's never been in an oversized hardcover, an essential, showcases, DC, and it's never been in an omnibus. So for the first time, we have the first half of the 5 years later arc. Let's get this open and talk a little bit about these characters. So let's get this open. We have the black bookend pages there. Legion of Superheroes 5 years later Omnibus Volume 1. Here's the big epic logo with the stars behind it. The table of contents. You have Jeb Woodard, Steve Cook, Louise Prandy, and Aaron Vanover. As far as who to give the proper credit to for putting this book together, these are all the table of contents, and you're about to see if it's like the Paul Dini Omnibus, if it have page numbers down at the bottom or not. So it all kicks off here with Legion of Superheroes, Issue 1, 5 years later. So what does that mean? Alright, so first, let's start at the beginning while you look at some of this artwork. And that is in 1958. The writer Otto Binder and Al Plastino was the artist, created these characters from the 30th and then eventually the 31st century that are time travelers, and they're known as the Legion of Superheroes. Inspired by Superboy, they created a band of young heroes to protect the worlds, or the planets. And that's pretty much it. Superboy was a huge part of their storyline. Retcons? That is no longer the case, especially during this part. So in 1984, 85, 86, when we had this big Crisis on Infinite Earths that retconned a bunch of storylines, Superboy was not part of their origin. For all those years, all those stories, no, that did not happen. So that's one thing to remember when reading this particular storyline. So these characters were not inspired by Superboy, but rather they were inspired by another character who went by the name of Mon-El, and during this particular run, he is known as Largand, or Valor, rather. So he's kind of like the inspiration for the Legion of Superheroes during this particular storyline. The Legion of Superheroes, for years, have had a lot of talent behind it. From their creators, all the way to Steve Ditko, Roy Thomas, Paul Levitz, Jim Shooter. Jim Shooter was writing Legion of Superheroes when he was like 14 years old. And Paul Levitz eventually, like I mentioned, Keith Giffen was the big artist during that run. Chris Sprouse, as a matter of fact, Chris Sprouse starts in this book right here. But Keith Giffen was the big driving force behind the Legion of Superheroes, the Great Darkness saga. Him and Paul Levitz worked together on that. And for years, especially after Crisis on Infinite Earths, both of them wrote Legion of Superheroes until this big event called the Magic War. It was Paul Levitz's last 4-part storyline. A bunch of characters got killed off, and that was it for the Legion until this book. So Keith Giffen, the artist on that book, became the writer of this, and he wanted to bring them back. He wanted to bring back the Legion of Superheroes, and he did it with 5 years later. So we're even further into the future, where the Earth is dominated by the Dominators. That was kind of a dumb sentence, sorry about that, which are these aliens here. Let me see if I can find them right here, that I'm sure you've seen plenty of times in the animated series, or even in the Invasion storyline, or just throughout DC. They've been around since the 60s. So these guys are now ruling the earth. So Keith Giffen, together with Tom and Mary Bierbaum, along with inks and sometimes writer Al Gordon, created this storyline. Now, most people that have read Legion of Superheroes would tell you that this is some of the darkest stories for the Legion of Superheroes, for our characters that are usually lighthearted. Even throughout the Great Darkness saga, there was still hope in their storylines. This is a lot different. So one of the things I will say that you're probably noticing, because this is obvious, is that Keith Giffen decided, even during his run with Paul Levitz, to do these 9-panel layouts as far as storytelling. He thought that you could tell more stories through 9 panels than you could just with different kind of panel layouts, like just have 4 or 5 panels in a page. And honestly, it's most of the book. If I just pick through a random page here, as you can tell, we're on page 641, so they do have page numbers. Most of the book has this layout. I think that's a turnoff for some people, though. Like, I remember one of the biggest complaints about the Mr. Miracle storyline by Tom King were the overuse of 9-panel layouts. Of course, when he wants to use more than one panel, Keith Giffen finds a way to cheat. Like, somebody's hand would go across 3 panels if it's an action shot. But for about 80% of the book, I will say that it is this traditional 9-panel page layout. So if that's not for you, then just something to keep in mind. It is wordy, I will say that as well. And I know it's not a review of the book, but a lot of people have been told that this is a great jumping on point for Legion of Superheroes. And I'm not going to lie, it is. It is a big jumping on point. However, you're going to have to do a lot of research and work in order to enjoy it. And you're going to have to go through a lot of story to get to some kind of answers as to what exactly is going on. Because one of my favorite things about this book, and I can see why people don't like it, is that Keith Giffen just assumes that you are going to want to figure this out on your own. You're going to, even if you've read nothing about Legion of Superheroes, you're going to follow these characters and figure out who they were in the past. He literally throws you at what it seems like the middle of a storyline, with no bios or information, no little caption boxes that say, at one time this was Chameleon Boy, this was Karate Kid, Star Boy, Brainiac 5, Sun Boy, Bouncing Boy, Phantom Girl, none of that. You either know the characters' names, or eventually, through the pages, there is Valor. Through the pages, you figure out who these characters once were. So, that's something to keep in mind, because like I've been asked, that's one of the biggest questions I've been asked, why I haven't made this video yet, and if this is a really good jumping on point before you commit to spending $150 on a book, because it is pretty pricey. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with this book, and that is I used to have some of these issues in here because I wanted to know everything about every comic book as a kid. But when I got into middle school, I was like, I want to know everything there is to know about all these obscure characters. And Legion of Superheroes was one of these little corners that I knew very little about. I had no idea who these characters were other than the crossover events that they were part of. So I got some of these single issues. I got some of the Paul Levitz run. And again, I'm not a big fan of the Silver Age. Even back then, I tried to get into it. So, before I go any further about my story with this, we are now breaking the 9-panel traditional comic book page for these, and that is because Keith Giffen is no longer, or as these issues here, is not the main writer. It is now Tom and Mary writing it, and Keith Giffen is just a co-plotter. So that's why we go to this, and then we go back to this. I like the way that that's spread out. So we do from time to time get a break, but I'm not kidding, it's not until issue 8. So back to what I was saying. So I was familiar with some of the Legion of Superheroes, mainly in the 90s or during the Legion Lost by Abnett and Lanning. But the biggest one for me was Mark Waid's run, the pre-Infinite Crisis stuff. And then, of course, all that went away after Infinite Crisis. Because the problem with Legion, for me at least, and I don't know about anybody else, is that the freaking characters have been retconned so many times. I just told you a little bit about what happened with Superboy, right? Superboy was a big part of their career, of their origin since 1958. And because of Crisis, all of that, 30 years went away. Well, almost 30 years. But that wasn't the only time it was after Zero Hour, these characters right here, all of this was retconned. After Infinite Crisis, the same thing happened. And then we had Legion of Three Worlds during the Final Crisis event. And I can't even tell you who the hell the Legion of Superheroes are in the New 52. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of people have stayed away from these stories, or part of the reason why I was like, okay, I'll read about the Legion from time to time. And the other thing is that they haven't had a lot of collected editions as far as post-Silver Age. We've had a few trade paperbacks of Paul Levitt's run. We've had some of Andy Lanning and Dan Abnett's run. And we did have a big chunk of Mark Waid's run. Most of that stuff is collected, along with Supergirl and the Legion of Superheroes. But for the most part, the stuff in the early 80s, or the stuff post-Crisis on Infinite Earths, including Legionnaires, haven't been collected properly. So let's talk about what this collects. This collects Legion of Superheroes 1 through 39. Who's Who, just the Legion of Superhero pages, 1 through 11, 13, 14, and 16. The Timberwolf 5-issue miniseries, the first 3 annuals of Legion of Superheroes, and then Superman 478, which is the Time and Time Again storyline. That's what this collects. It has over 1,400 pages. It has 1,424 pages, as a matter of fact. Keith Giffen being the main plotter of this storyline. So 5 years later, the world, the planets, the universe are a lot darker. I've always liked this Keith Giffen cover. It's simple, but gets to the point as to what's happened 5 years later. Now, that's pretty much all I can say without giving any spoilers, right? It's really difficult to talk about this book without giving spoilers. So for me, I was very excited to read this, because it's literally the first time that I'm reading this book, and I'm familiar with a lot of these characters. It was still difficult to get through. It is dense and sometimes boring. Not really repetitive. Just, man, it's just not so much action. There's a mystery going on. But halfway through issue 6 and some of 7, the beginning of 7, and then by 8, I was hooked. It was like finding old friends again through these new faces. It was really weird, because I've never been that attached to the characters of the Legion of Superheroes. Like I've said, it mainly through crossovers or through the few runs that I've read that have been collected in collected editions. But damn, this was good. The payoff was good. There, issue 25, which, spoilers, but damn, the cover spoils that. It's so good, like, when you get there. Because it is dull, it is dense, it is wordy, but holy crap, that ride of just getting there for that payoff was so good. I didn't see a lot of this coming, a lot of the twists and turns that it took. So it took me over a week. I got to about issue 27, and I think that was enough for me to realize that, okay, I can do a video, and I can do it justice. Because if I had done a video just reading those first 3 issues, like I normally try to do with an omnibus before I do an overview, if I'm not familiar with the content, I try to go at least read 3 to 5 issues. But if I had stayed and read 3 to 5 issues of this, I would have been like, dude, save your money. Don't bother with this. This is such a complicated story about characters you may not even know about, and if this is a jumping on point, I don't see why people keep saying that. But it is a great jumping on point, but you have to do a lot of work and research. Luckily, we have the internet now, so you don't have to go and dig through issues of comics or ask the old guys at the comic book store. You just look on the internet as to who some of these characters are. Now, you might be spoiled. Oh man, the ending of this story arc is what I'm talking about. The ending of issue 24. Holy crap. Freaking awesome. Let's go here towards the later part of the book to talk about what else is collected in here, because I think I've talked enough about it. We have Jason Pearson's first story arc here. I used to have a Brandon Peterson issue, so I remember Brandon Peterson was an artist on this. You have Keith Giffen, like I said, supplying most of the artwork. Now, Keith Giffen, it's very different when he's inking his own stuff. You can see him develop this style that I know him from. But everything's collected in here, by the way. The little journals, the bio pages you get later on from the Who's Who. So let me just show you an example. When Keith Giffen, right here, this is him inked by Al Gordon. And then this is Keith Giffen inking himself. So, there you go. Completely different, right? This is Keith Giffen inking himself. This is the way that I like his art style. It's very European looking, but I'm a big fan of that. And you also have Stuart Eminem as an artist from time to time. Mark Waid was an editor during this time. Here's the Timberwolf Miniseries. And Timberwolf looks different from time to time, but I will let you figure that out. And now, something you may have noticed as I'm flipping through here, and this isn't much of a spoiler, but are these traditional-looking Legionnaires. And these guys that appear here will end up going and forming their own series, and that is the Legionnaires. I think we've only had 1 or 2 trade paperbacks of that, if I'm not mistaken. But this main Legion of Superheroes books focuses on the older, dirtier, and more jaded Legion of Superheroes. Well, the remains of those. The more colorful and youthful Legionnaires are in the Legionnaires comic. But they do appear in this book from time to time. Now, let's look at the extras here. Here's a pin-up right here from Legion of Superheroes number 13, telling you who these characters are and who they formerly were. And here's the Who's Who on all the Legion of Superheroes. Some of them you may have seen, but because, like I said, this is a darker story. Actually, this page looked like it was scanned bad. I don't see that very often. It does happen, though. A bad scan page does happen. I've seen it in Marvel Epics. I've seen them in DC Omnis. I've seen it in Marvel Omnis. But every once in a while, you'll see a bad scan page. What was I saying? Yeah, these are the Who's Who of the Legion of Superheroes, their alter egos, and what their occupations are. So this is important. If you care about Glorith, who's actually a main important character in this run, I won't say why, but this is really important if you want to flip back and forth and try to figure out who these characters were at one time. That's if you want to. And let's see, as far as after the Who's Who, you have Legion of Superheroes postcards, all of these drawn by Keith Giffen. And then promotional art for the Legion of Superheroes number 1. Let's look at this binding. It is sewn binding. And there's that eye. Mainly that's weighed down. The inner spine is weighed down by all that glue that I talk about DC books usually use, especially for books like this. This is 1,424 pages. But not that you need to worry about it, because there's hardly any splash pages until we went to the back here. And this is one thing that I like to point out, though, because of the excess glue and the page count and the paper quality, because it is this thicker, glossy paper. The book wants to close on you when you get towards the back or towards the front of the book. But it's not too bad. I think after a few read-throughs, this will be fine. Like, we're on page 32 right now. It's just a small little thing, but I know it bothers some people. But honestly, it's just a small gripe. You don't have to keep holding it down. It starts laying flat once you get to the 100th page. But like I said, I do want to point that out for people that kind of stuff bothers. Look, a full splash page by Keith Giffen. They do exist from time to time in this book, but be prepared for these 9-panel page layouts. And that, as they say, is that. Now, you can pick up this book from our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for brand new graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off the cover price. Cheap Graphic Novels prides itself on packaging your books so they arrive safely and in excellent condition, as well as prompt and helpful service. And check out their bargain bin for even greater deals up to 90% off cover price. And for you Minties, Cheap Graphic Novels is running a special promotion. If you're a first-time customer, let them know you were referred by Near Mint Condition at the checkout, and you'll receive a credit for free shipping on your next order. Now, this is only for U.S. customers. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discounts, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the page count, the build of the book, and the content, and a little bit, and I mean tiny bit, of Legion of Superhero history trivia. So please leave those comments down below. Let me know if you're picking this up, if you have any interest in it, if you're not interested anymore, if you're hoping for a volume 2, if you're excited that this is the first time any of these issues have been collected in collected editions. I would love to know all those comments down below. Please don't forget to hit like, subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. We put out videos every day. We can be found on Redbubble and on Patreon. Those are amazing ways to support the channel, and thank you to our existing patrons. And more importantly, please everybody stay healthy, stay safe out there, and much love to all of you.